disasters decapitates our economic base by almost 2% of our entire economy every year.
We've costed what is under threat at the moment, and it comes to almost $1 billion.
We need $50,000 for every person to move them and stabilize their lives. That's $1 billion in total.
We need to redefine GDP not just as gross domestic product, but as green domestic product.
Asia and the Pacific is the most disaster-prone region in the world. Sea levels are rising by up to 8 millimeters per year in some parts of the Pacific. Over 15 years, cyclones in the Arabian Sea have become more frequent and more intense. The World Bank is predicting a $68 billion annual bill before the end of the century. Changes in the Earth's climate have been ascribed to natural variation, but also to global warming. There has been a 3/4 degree rise in the average temperature of the Earth since the 1880s, and scientists predict this may rise to between 2 and 4 degrees by the end of the century. Less dramatic, but no less costly, are patterns of development that are squandering nature's natural capital. Its fish, farmland and forest, its freshwater and fresh air. We travel to Vietnam, the Philippines, India and the Pacific islands of Kiribati, and find that among the 1.8 billion people who live within 100 kilometers of the coast, people are trying out new ways to cope with both kinds of disaster, the natural and the man-made. For the South Pacific islands of Kiribati, sea level rise is quite simply a fact of life. The government is preparing for evacuation. 100,000 Kiribati may become stateless.
If we turn to 20 degrees to the port.
According to Kiribati's president, the aim is to migrate with dignity. He does not want the islanders to become desperate boat people shunted around the Pacific. The main emphasis is on education and training, creating a cadre of qualified Kiribati that other countries on the Pacific Rim will welcome.
The strategy is to educate our people, to train them so that they will and can migrate on merit rather than as refugees. I think it's important to understand that. And I think it's important to do something that is already part of the policies of the different countries.
Kiribati is an archipelago nation, spread over 3.5 million square kilometers of ocean. 32 tiny coral atolls and 1 island are populated. Tarawa is the largest and capital. Its highest point is just 3 meters above sea level. If global warming does reach the predicted upper limit of a 4-degree rise by the end of the century, almost the whole of Tarawa will be underwater, according to a Chinese government-funded report. "65-year-old Iria Maireri has lived on Tarawa most of his life. His seafront village is protected by a stout 2-meter-high wall. But 2 years ago, it was breached in a storm.
It's sad because people have gone out. People have left their houses. And this is where we have the broken seawall. And it's just let the water comes in. As you can see now, it's nothing but a big channel now here. This was torn out 2 years ago, and it used to be houses all across to the other end. But now it's no more houses. This family here, they're gone out. But as you can see now, there's nothing but a big channel of seawater comes in. Our only hope is the good Lord. What can the good Lord help us in this situation?
Building ever higher and stronger seawalls is the first defense. With limited resources, the priority is protecting key infrastructure. This wall is under construction to protect Tarawa's airport. But mostly villagers are left to their own devices to build seawalls, some with more success than others. With no uniform standards, one weak link can mean inundation for all.
We never have this kind of problem, say, 30 or 40 years ago. But now we know that there is a good sign that the water is gradually coming up in height, and people are getting worried.
Most countries, they think, oh, you can move back. But they've got mountains behind them. We don't have that. And we keep moving back, we fall off on the other end.
Kiribati's problems do not end with the rising seas. As the most developed island in the archipelago, Tarawa is a magnet for migrants from outer islands. With 36,000 residents, the population density of the southern part of the island is 10,000 per square kilometre, one of the highest in the world. Even though many migrants end up living among old wrecks in makeshift huts, life here is an improvement.
I came here because Tarawa is the capital, and more things happen here. There's also good schooling for my kids. For me, there are plenty of jobs to be found if I need money. And when I go fishing, it's easy to earn extra money by selling my catch.
A fast expanding population is placing unsustainable demands on Tarawa. Freshwater supplies are running out, and salt water is contaminating the wells. Pelenise Alofa runs a local NGO.
The problem that we're facing now is the contamination. We have to make sure that our water doesn't get contaminated. And we make sure the bathroom is not close to the well. We make sure that the rubbish is not dumped in the soil around the well. Now with the climate change, the contamination comes from the rising of the sea. When it's high tide, this well water becomes salty. It is saltier than it should be. Yeah.
Most wells can no longer be used for drinking water, so the government has provided a piped supply.
And you are supposed to be collecting this. You have a bucket, clean bucket, to collect, and it's on for about 1 hour every second day, and it fills up like 2 big containers.
Overcrowding is using up the limited supply.
If we have 5 other people in this family, that bucket, those 2 buckets of water won't be enough.
We've costed all of the what is under threat at the moment, and it comes to almost $1 billion.
Kiribati has begun making approaches to neighbouring states to take its people. Just one response has been received, from a country that's just as poor.
I've had an offer from East Timor. The President mentioned this, but he's not been able to follow up on that. I am waiting for the response he undertook to take it to his parliament. But apart from that, nobody else has offered.
The government is determined its population will not end up stateless. So it's diverting scarce resources to helping them get the type of qualifications and skills that the rich countries want. Kautuna Kaitara is director of the Kiribati Adaptation Program, set up in 2005.
We'd like to have the people who are educated and can mix in the new environment. They are going to perhaps in New Zealand, Australia, and they have to be qualified and they can enter the workforce and not be regarded as second-class refugees because of the effect of climate change. We don't want to be climate change refugees, so we want to migrate with dignity.
There's a marine training centre. They train 70 Kiribati per year. Successful recruits have jobs waiting on foreign ships.
This is the bridge simulator. This is where the trainees have opportunities to learn how to do steering and navigation.
Competition for a place at the school is fierce, as the training provides graduates with excellent job prospects. Over half find jobs at sea, with shops and other businesses also valuing the students.
When my family heard that I'd passed the entrance exam to the training center, they were really excited. They said, carry on working hard, because now you have the possibility of a future.
Discipline is strict. When the trainees go off campus at weekends, they must return on time.
When the ships are delayed at the port, that's cost a lot of money for the company to pay. So if any of these trainees come in after 15 minutes after 8:30 of Sunday evening, that's automatically dismissal for the trainees.
It's not just the young men who benefit from the chance of a job. At the island's hospital, a new training program ensures nurses have the same qualifications as those trained in New Zealand.
After 3 years, they will achieve their diploma in nursing, and they can work in Kiribati. And if they wish to migrate to New Zealand or to Fiji within the region or to Australia, there is no problem with their qualification. They are up to that level, and they will have no problem when they migrate.
Kiribati's president's hope is that the prospect of a humanitarian disaster, of an entire nation driven out to sea, might spur the international community to invest in the infrastructure needed to keep the sea at bay.
People are getting a sense of threat, a sense of insecurity. And really the question is, do we have a future? We would like to think and to believe that we can still remain in these islands for many, many decades to come. But at the rate things are happening, it can only happen with a very, very serious amount of resources being put in, resources which we don't have.
In part 2, we visit Gujarat in India, where we find the impact of global warming is being taken just as seriously. Gujarat in northwest India. The state is one of the richest and fastest growing in the country. In 2010, its GDP rose by over 11%. Agriculture is booming, growing at twice the national average, 10% per annum. While in 2009, its fishing industry was valued at $650 million. But both its fishing and farming communities are vulnerable to disasters. Between 1995 and 2007, the frequency of cyclones in the Arabian Sea have increased 5-fold compared to the previous 25 years. Gujarat has over 50,000 families who make their living from the sea. Here in Kutch, in northern Gujarat, the fishermen travel up to 5 kilometers to reach their boats at low tide. Bharat Patel works for a fishermen's welfare organization. He's visiting fisherman Kamisha Ali Bushad at his shelter on one of the buns, or sand dunes, that line the shore. Kamisha will never forget the 1998 storm that took the lives of 10 of his family members.
I lost my mother and my father, my son, even my nephews and other members of my family. We've seen many storms in our lives, but this kind of cyclone we saw for the first time in our lives.
But the increased severity of the storms is not the only threat. Alongside this traditional economy is breakneck industrial development. Here in Badreshwar, along 60 kilometers of coastline, creeks are built over and mangroves have been cut down.
If this situation continues, there'll be nothing in our future. You see, the way the government is supporting industry here means one day our entire community will be finished. There'll be no fishing, and we'll have no other means of livelihood.
For Fishermen's Welfare Officer Bharat Patel, the rapid economic growth seen along Gujarat's coastline is exacting a heavy toll on the fishing community.
There are two effects on the fisherfolk.
Firstly, the man-made disaster of industrialization that has affected the intertidal zone. The creation of intake channels has resulted in the loss of their traditional fishing grounds. And secondly, the dumping of industrial effluents has affected the fish. The catches are dwindling noticeably.
The fishing family's vulnerability is made worse by a lack of basic amenities.
In the song, we were saying that all citizens have the right to education and the provision of clean drinking water. But why haven't the government done anything for the fisherfolk? There is no drinking water, no proper roads, no schools close by, no health center. We have no rights.
Lacking clean drinking water means the women spend half their day fetching and carrying from the nearest well, 4 kilometers away. Amit Garg is a professor at the Indian Institute of Management.
They don't have potable drinking water. They have to walk for 4 kilometers to get water. And a child's childhood is lost in fetching water and wood for energy purpose when we should go for schooling. If you provide them a good development model, I think they'll become more resilient.
India has adopted a strong set of environmental laws to provide such a model, one that aims to underpin economic growth by safeguarding the environment. But as India's Minister for the Environment points out, it's up to the state and local authorities to make them work.
In the environment and forest field, it is absolutely true that all the laws are national. The Forest Conservation Act is a national law. Our water pollution and air pollution laws are national laws passed by Parliament. But the implementation is that of the state and local government. So we need to have a system by which we incentivize good environmental performance by the states and disincentivize, penalize bad environmental performance by the states. That we don't have today. That's one of the big challenges in this job.
This is the Great Rann of Kutch, a giant salt desert stretching for 30,000 square kilometers from Gujarat into Pakistan. The only sweet water here comes from rain. Just 10 kilometers from the desert's edge, Dordo village was in decline as the young men left the parched earth in search of work. But the village now is prospering. It's adapted to the harsh conditions by harvesting its rainwater.
Rainwater harvesting.
Rainwater harvesting has assisted in halting migration because now we have big storage tanks and we've created a big lake in the middle. We've created a big lake in the middle of which is a well with a solar pump that gives water to the village members.
The monsoon rains are channeled into the reservoir that in turn feeds storage tanks. These closed containers prevent evaporation and hold water for distribution to homes and water points during the dry season.
The availability of water has changed the lives of these people drastically, and the revolution which started with a small thing, now the same thing has been replicated in all villages, and we can visualize that availability of water has changed the lives of people. In fact, number of tourists are coming to watch the White Desert, and this is just possible due to the availability of water and sanitation facilities.
It's the cities where the dash for industrial growth has created most pollution. This is the state's biggest city, Ahmedabad. 10 years ago, Ahmedabad was ranked as the 4th most polluted city in India. Today, things have changed. A rapid bus public transport system and a move from diesel fuel to cleaner natural gas, or CNG, has transformed the city's reputation.
Earlier, this city was one of the 4th polluted city in this country, and today we have gone 68 number. So this is because government of Gujarat and the people of Ahmedabad, they have made a combined effort, and it is also going to help environment and very affordable.
Buses run in their own dedicated roadways. They provide a fast and cheap transport service that's tempting some passengers to leave their cars at home, thus reducing pollution. The Ahmedabad Rapid Transport Service won the International 2010 Sustainable Transport Award and was hailed as a model for other cities to follow. But for Minister Ramesh, the challenge is changing the model of development not just in Gujarat, but throughout this country of over 1 billion people.
This syndrome of blind economic growth which says grow now, pay later, which is what the United States has done, which is what China is probably doing. We don't want to replicate that growth trajectory. We want to move on a cleaner and a greener growth trajectory. And I think one of the advantages of being a latecomer to high growth like India is that it does not have to replicate the mistakes of the other countries.
Next week on Nature Inc., we're in the Philippines and the disaster capital of the world. And in Vietnam, in the Mekong Delta, to see how one of the world's main rice-growing regions is adapting to rising sea levels.